The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, the deadly epidemic invading Chicago's suburbs. Heroin use is surging in America. How DuPage County finds itself in the epicenter.
The clock is ticking. Will congressmen from Illinois support the president if he orders an attack on Syria after the chemical attack that killed more than 1,000 civilians?
Plus, what would we do without the drive-thru? Pull up and roll down your car window for food, money, even a prayer. These stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Suburban police are battling a deadly epidemic.
Heroin used to be an inner city problem, but not anymore. People of all ages, from the inner city to affluent suburbs, are getting hooked on heroin and dying at alarming rates.
And where are they getting this drug? It's coming down the heroin highway, known to most of us as the Eisenhower Expressway.
Tonight, we hear from a survivor who battled his way back from addiction and from those on the front lines waging war on this menace.
Mostly A student. I was in the AP classes, honor roll, all that stuff.
27-year-old Bill Patrianakos grew up like most kids in southwest suburban Homer Glen. He had a small, loving family and big dreams.
I was accepted to Loyola, and I went there for a year. I was going to become a doctor. I was in the pre-med program, but I also became a heroin addict too.
Bill says he got high nearly every single day for 5 years. First, a few pills he found around the house to self-medicate his depression, then marijuana and cocaine. When the pills got too expensive, he moved on to heroin.
I went online and I looked for where everyone was getting arrested for heroin, and I drove straight there. And it took me about 20 minutes to find a guy who was willing to sell to me.
That place, Chicago's West Side, right off the Eisenhower Expressway, at almost every exit between Harlem and the Loop, a stretch known by addicts and police officers as the Heroin Highway.
It's like a candy store.
Clean and sober for about 6 years now, Bill works as a web developer and sits on the board of an organization called HERO, or Heroin Epidemic Relief Organization. Two suburban fathers, John Roberts and Brian Kirk, founded the group after both losing sons to heroin.
We have all the evidence to prove that this is a serious epidemic, and it's an epidemic that's aimed right at our children.
Heroin is the next health crisis in this country.
Kathleen Burke is CEO at the Robert Crown Center for Health Education. The center works with suburban schools to educate students about the dangers of heroin. Burke says just say no doesn't work with teens. They want the truth.
We tell them now, you're high. When you start using heroin, it's really pleasant. You know, it's a high that you want to chase the rest of your life.
And that's the problem. Kathleen says the drug is toxic and sinister.
It changes your brain. It changes the way in which your brain functions, and it keeps you craving the drug. Even if you've been through rehab, you continually crave that drug.
The Robert Crown Center uses an animated presentation as part of its effort to reach young people. Bill says teens need to hear the whole story, the pleasure and the pain associated with drug use.
Right now, health education is about scaring you into not doing it, not being honest with the kids in terms of telling them, yeah, you know what, drugs do feel good. That's why people do them.
In hard-hit DuPage County, where they've seen nearly 1 overdose death a week, law enforcement officers educate teens and parents while cracking down on dealers and users. Just last week, they helped make dozens of arrests in a heroin ring allegedly led by a Chicago man whose underlings delivered the drugs to DuPage County. The state's attorney there, Robert Berlin, is spearheading efforts to battle heroin. Your office in the DEA last week made 31 arrests in a drug bust that went on for about 6 months. You broke up a heroin ring. How big of a difference do you think that'll make?
I think in the short term, it will make a difference. I think drug dealers will be concerned about coming into DuPage County to sell their heroin. In the large picture, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Kind of daunting. We often think of heroin as an inner city problem, but clearly it's gotten its hooks into the suburbs. What are you seeing?
What we're seeing is kids as young as high school age, young adults, and professionals actually all the way up into their 60s are getting addicted to heroin. It's easy to get, it's cheap, and there's tons of it out there.
How big is the problem? Talk about what you're seeing on a daily basis and a weekly basis in DuPage County.
We have a real problem in this county, and it's not just DuPage County. Will County, Lake County, all of the suburban areas are experiencing it. But we had in 2012 38 heroin overdose deaths, and in this year, in the last the first 8 months of the year, 33. So that's 71 heroin overdose deaths in 20 months. That is an epidemic.
Wow. Why are people dying?
The heroin today is 10 times more powerful than it was in the 60s. And it's easy to use. You don't have to inject it anymore, which is why so many people have gotten attracted to it. You can smoke it and you can snort it, but because it's so powerful, it's killing people. And then we see kids who will be off it for a while, and then when they relapse, their tolerance level is very low and they use too much, and as a result they overdose and end up dying.
Your office must see a lot of this. How heartbreaking is it for you to witness this week after week, the toll it takes on people and families?
It's terrible and it's gut-wrenching. I've met a number of parents of children who've died from overdoses on heroin, and they live with this every day. It's something that they experience, and yes, you feel their pain.
Talk about where this drug is coming from. I mean, this is kind of something that's gotten bigger and bigger over time, is it not?
No question. Most of the heroin in this county, people are getting from the city. And we've heard the term heroin highway, and there is a heroin highway. It's the Reagan Expressway, which leads into 290. These suburban kids are traveling into the city. They get off the expressway. There's a number of drug spots that they go to. They get their heroin, they get back on the expressway, they come back out to the county. And it's very easy to get. Now, most of the heroin that we're seeing is coming from Mexico. It's the Mexican cartels.
As someone in law enforcement and someone who prosecutes some of the people who use and sell this, how do you make a dent in this? How do you stop it?
There's a two-pronged approach that we're taking out here. The first is the educational component. We're trying to get into the schools. I've been participating in these heroin forums in DuPage County for the last year and a half. Going to the schools, going to the communities, educating parents and children on what heroin is, the dangers of it, how to avoid it, and what to look out for. That's the first approach. The second approach is the law enforcement approach. And this heroin bust that we just had last week will certainly make a difference. But the problem is, for every drug dealer we take off the street, there's 5 more that are ready to take that spot and continue the trade. So it's going to require a lot of resources, but it's a multi-pronged approach.
And this is big business.
Huge business. The ring that we just took down last week, they were bringing in anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 a day in heroin sales.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, you just wonder what that looks like in terms of how many people are then using the drug.
It's a drug that we're seeing through all economic sectors, people from many different walks of life. It's not just students and young adults. We've seen professionals get hooked on heroin, middle-aged adults.